I call Kelvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd just like to take over from where the previous speaker left off by the review by the Justice and Electoral Committee in 2 years' time. What the member is in effect saying, and what the Minister is in effect saying, is that they're going to trial law for 2 years. I mean, that's not the role of Parliament, to test law out and to trial law out. You either make law that works or you don't make it at all. And I think it's silly to say, let's just try this law, let's just put it out there and see how it goes in 2 years' time. We're going to have a look at it. It was a lot more sensible to have the two bills, with one with the sunset clause and one that continues on. I'd also like to talk about clause 17.2, and Jacinda Ardern spoke about the release from custody. It means release from custody in a prison, or if a person is detained in an immigration or other facility following release from prison. Mr. Speaker, the immigration facilities, I just want to finish off a point I was trying to make earlier. When there is a review of what's gone on in the immigration facilities in Australia, guards will be asked, why did they participate in the abuses? Their answer will be, we were simply following orders. And where have we heard that discussion, that type of defence before, Mr. Speaker? That's why it is imperative that even though we cannot do any, the Australians are a sovereign nation, they can make the laws that we want. It is imperative that we stand up to laws that are wrong and that lead to human rights abuses. I'd just like to talk about the criteria for determination that a person is a returning offender and a returning prisoner. They're similar but different. A returning prisoner is a subset of a returning offender. And a returning offender is a person who has been convicted in an overseas jurisdiction of an offence for conduct that constitutes an imprisonable offence in New Zealand, and being liable for deportation or removal as a result of that conviction has returned to New Zealand. And this also includes a returning prisoner. So that was clause 7. So clause 17, criteria for determination that prisoner is a returning prisoner. The Commissioner must determine that a person is a returning prisoner if the Commissioner is satisfied that the person A, has been convicted in an overseas jurisdiction of an offence for conduct that constitutes an imprisonable offence in New Zealand, and B, has in respect of that conviction been sentenced to 1, a term of imprisonment of more than 1 year, or 2, 2 or more terms of imprisonment that are cumulative, the total of which is more than 1 year. The reason I raise those two definitions, Mr. Speaker, is because I have an actual case of a detainee. Now, my understanding is he's still on Christmas Island. He's a guy that I met, but who knows? He could be on a plane right now and be ready to land in New Zealand in the not too distant future. But here's his story. And this is, an email from his mother. The young man's name is Bodine Adams. He's been here in Australia since he was 4 years old. All he knows is Australia. He's no connection with New Zealand at all. He's a son, brother, father, fiancé and friend to all whose lives he enters. So he got into a toxic relationship. His partner used to beat the living out of him. It was reported to the local Ipswich police several times. The response was always the same, quote, "You're a big bloke and she's hitting you." There was never any, unquote, there was never any paperwork filled out, as they made Bo feel like a wimp. The partner's father was a police officer there. Bo had asked her to leave many times. One day she was hitting him with a pole and it broke the skin on his right wrist. He grabbed the pole out of her hand, struck her on the top of the leg. She left and went to the police station taking out a DVO, which I assume is a domestic violence order. No mark was left on her leg. He decided it would be easier to get away from that relationship, so he left and went north to Mackay. She constantly texted and phoned him. Then within the week of him leaving, she boarded a plane and flew up there. She phoned him claiming she was going to drop the DVO and had no way home and no money. She pleaded with him to take her back to Ipswich. He answered her text, answered her phone call, picked her up from the airport and took her back to Ipswich. They argued all the way back. Back at the house she attacked him. He restrained her by the wrists while she constantly kicked him in the shins. She went straight to the police station and said he had broken the DVO and claimed he assaulted her. So he was charged with occasioning bodily harm and 3 breaches of the DVO. One was the texting, one was the phone call, both of which she instigated, and one was holding her captive, and they assumed that was because he was driving her back in the car back to Ipswich. He went to Brisbane Correctional Facility awaiting his hearing. He was there a total of 159 days. They took his issue to the Supreme Court. Judge Donaldson presided. He was shocked at her claiming she was scared of her life, quote, scared for her life, unquote. He continued to contact him and then boarded a plane to be with him. He was released on bail. He never broke the bail, but he did break his parole conditions, or the conditions of his release, which he smoked cannabis. Now, he was due to be released on the 18th of May. They went to collect him, only to be told he was going to Perth. He was flown to Perth, then went to Yonga Hill, which is a detention centre. On the 8th of October, he was sent to Christmas Island. Now, the reason I raise this case is, reading the story, and I admit this is one side of the story, I'm not sure that he's either a convicted prisoner or a, what was the other?
Offender.
Or a returning offender. So he's been in trouble with the law. It sounds like he was on remand. It doesn't sound like he was actually convicted of anything. And like I say, Mr. Speaker, I'm just taking what I'm reading here from the mother's email. But if that's the case, then what applies to him if he happens to be on the plane that's heading here in a couple of days? What does he fall under? Does he turn up and have no conditions imposed on him? Does he turn up and certainly get no social support and any sort of support to get himself back on his feet, to get a job, to feed himself, to clothe himself? That's why I have concerns around this bill that it's been rushed. I have to admit I stumbled over a few words because of the wording. It says criteria for determination, this is clause 17, criteria for determination that person is returning prisoner. Being a former school teacher, I don't know if I would have accepted that grammar from a student. This is why we have concerns that the bill actually doesn't cover everything that it should do, and that the least of the problems are grammatical areas. The worst of the problems are that there's some of these detainees that are, or returning people, that aren't actually going to fall into the auspices of this bill. I just also want to touch on, again, the social side of things, that I believe that, there's nothing in the bill around the social side of things, looking after these detainees when they return to New Zealand. Again, I raised, it was about 5 or 6 weeks ago, I suggested that the Minister for Māori Affairs put some budget aside to look after these people when they arrive, so they can be fed, housed on a marae for a few weeks so that they can get on their feet. He said, no, that's not necessary, because every Māori, and let's face it, many of these people are Māori, every Māori has some sort of connection to somewhere in New Zealand, even if they don't know it. When earlier in the day when he spoke about the terrible events in France, he finished with a saying. It said, it was a waiata, mā te tika, mā te pono, mā te aroha, which means through the truth, through faith and through compassion, we can achieve things. Now, I'm just asking where the Minister of Māori Affairs' compassion is for these people who are actually, if he's saying that all Māoris have connections back here in New Zealand, where's the compassion for these people so that we can actually stand them on their feet and get them back to those very people that they're meant to be related to? And I met Raymond, I forget Raymond's last name, he was on TV the other night. He's a guy who said he was born in the South Island. He was deported back to New Zealand and arrived a matter of weeks ago. He had nowhere to go, nowhere to stay, and so an elderly couple from Taitokerau, from Whangarei, actually put him up in their place. A great act of compassion. Trouble is, that set a bit of a precedent. Not every person who comes back is actually going to have that sort of support when they get here. Kia ora.
I call Chris